Hey there, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Greg, this is Dad Rockin' Guitars, and today we're going to be taking a look at and comparing these two Telecasters. First is the Squier Classic Vibe 50s, and then also the Fender American Pro 2. Now obviously, like I said, these are both Telecasters, so they're going to have a lot in common, but they also have quite a few differences as well. So we're going to take a look at the specs, talk about what's different, we're going to listen to some sounds, see how they compare to each other, and at the end we'll discuss about why you might want to buy one over the other. Is this one going to save you some money and give you everything you need, or do you need to spend the extra cash and upgrade to the Fender USA build one? So with all that said, make sure you hit like and subscribe, and let's get started. Alright, so as we get started, if you have any questions, comments, think I left something out, would like to add something, make sure you leave those in the comments section down below. Happy to answer questions and always like reading all of your comments. And one last additional note is on the Squier Classic Vibe, this is a 2016 model. Around 2018-19, they kind of made some slight changes. Some are aesthetic, some might affect tone depending, and but I will make sure to point those out as we get to those different specs. But otherwise, this is a fully stock 2016 Squier Classic Vibe, other than I just put strap lock buttons on it. And as far as the Fender American Pro 2, it is a 2022 model, and again, the only thing I've done to this is put locking strap buttons on there. Everything else is completely stock. Alright, let's take a look at these specs. Obviously, these are both Telecasters and share the same basic Telecaster body shape, headstock shape, all that kind of stuff. The Classic Vibe is obviously made overseas. The 2016 I have was made in China. A lot of the newer ones are made in Indonesia. That was one of those changes that happened around 2018-19, so just something to keep in mind. Obviously, the Fender American Pro 2 is made in the USA. As far as the body wood materials, the Classic Vibe is made of pine, and the Fender American Pro 2 is alder. So definitely a difference in woods there. As far as the finish on both of these, it is that standard Fender glossy polyurethane finish over all the guitar. The one difference will be the neck on the American Pro 2, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. All right, taking a look at the fretboard, this is where there's one very obvious difference, and part of that was just my personal preference. The Classic Vibe is a maple fretboard on the neck. That's kind of your standard classic Tele. On the American Pro 2, I have a rosewood fingerboard. You can get it with maple. I chose rosewood. That's just a personal preference, as I like the way rosewood feels better, and usually kind of the way it looks better. But there's also something about that maple fretboard that's just classic Tele, so personal preference there. Now, as far as the fretboard radius, both of these have your standard 9.5 inch fretboard radius, and they are both 25.5 inch scale length as well. A couple of other things to note that are different on the fretboards. The American Pro 2 is going to have rolled off edges on the fretboard. Just makes it a little more comfortable to play, feels a little more broken in, that kind of thing. Now the Classic Vibe, the edges are not rolled off, but they're not super sharp or anything like that. They're still very comfortable, and really, honestly, I never really felt a great need for rolled off edges while playing the Classic Vibe. Another difference is in the number of frets. The Classic Vibe has 21 frets, which is going to be more of your vintage style fret number, and the American Pro 2 is going to have 22 frets. So if you like to get all the way up the fretboard and you need to play that high D on the high E string, it's available there for you. And the Classic Vibe, you're just going to have to bend it a little. Not a big deal. I don't spend a lot of time all the way up there that high on the fretboard, so not a big deal for me, but just something to consider. Also, regarding the frets, I will tell you that the frets on my Classic Vibe are definitely a bit shorter in height compared to the American Pro 2. American Pro 2 definitely has, I noticed when I first got it, has higher feeling frets. So the Classic Vibe for me, they're probably more close to a vintage height where they're not as tall as some modern ones, but both very comfortable to play. I never really even noticed on the Classic Vibe until I got the American Pro 2 and thought, wow, that definitely feels a little different. So just something to keep in mind there as well. All right, so let's take a look at those necks. They both obviously have maple necks, even though the fretboards are different. And the Classic Vibe is going to have that poly finish, just like the rest of the body of the guitar. That poly finish is going to continue up the neck, and it's going to have what they call a slim C shape on it. So it's a C shape, and it's a little bit thinner of a neck. So if you have smaller hands or just like a thinner neck, this is going to be really comfortable for you. Taking a look at the neck on the American Pro 2, it has what they call a supernatural satin finish. Some people find that easier to move up and down the back of the neck and not so sticky. So it's going to have that nice comfortable satin finish there. And as far as the neck shape, the American Pro 2 has what they call a deep C shaped neck, and it definitely is a little thicker, a little fuller in the hand, that kind of thing. So if that's your preference, you may find this neck a little more comfortable than the Classic Vibe. Although honestly, they're both very comfortable to play. Moving on up closer to the headstock, we have the bone nut here. They spec-wise, they are both bone nuts, and they appear to be. I have not taken them off and done any kind of testing, whatever, but they definitely appear to both be bone. And as far as the width spec-wise at the top, the Classic Vibe is supposed to be 42 millimeters, where the American Pro 2 is supposed to be 42.8 millimeters. So the American Pro 2 spec-wise should be a little bit wider at the nut. I don't have calipers to measure these to verify that, but spec-wise, that's what they're supposed to be. Coming up to the headstock, we see that we have the truss rod adjustment up here. One thing about the Classic Vibe, it is not an actual reissue of early Telecasters. If it was, it would have the truss rod adjustment at the other end of the neck, where you have to take the neck off to make the adjustment, put the neck back on, all that kind of stuff. So for me, I appreciate having the truss rod adjustment here at the headstock, more of the modern take on that. It's just a lot easier and quicker, and both of these have that. One major difference between these two guitars is the tuners. The Classic Vibe has the vintage style tuners, where you kind of drop them in the top, bend it over, and just start turning, which I really like. It's super quick and easy to change strings. And the American Pro 2 has more modern style, where you stick them through the side, but they are staggered also. That means the low strings are taller, where the high strings are going to be shorter, and that's just to change the break angle coming over the nut, all that kind of stuff. I find these a little bit harder to change, especially those higher strings where those tuner pegs are not that tall. So while it is a nice modern feature, for me personally, I kind of prefer the vintage tuners. All right, moving all the way back down to the other side of the neck, you can see here where we have our bolt-on neck. The Classic Vibe has a very traditional 4-bolt setup here. The American Pro 2 also has a 4-bolt setup, but you can see where the heel of this is carved a little bit, and so that plate is going to have a little bit of a curve. And what that does is allows you a little more access to those top frets. Just another little kind of comfort modern feature there. Another nice thing about the American Pro 2 is you see that little hole right there, and that's basically allows you to easily adjust the tilt of the neck. So basically here it's just a easy quick turn of a screw, where on the Classic Vibe, if you had to tilt the neck a little differently during a setup, you actually take the neck off, put a shim in there, all that kind of stuff. This is a nice modern feature on the American Pro 2 to make those adjustments quicker and easier. All right, moving on down to the pick guard. The Classic Vibe has your classic black 1-ply pick guard. It's got 5 screws mounted on it to hold that down, just like the earlier Telecasters did. On the American Pro 2, we have a multi-ply pick guard here, and it has more of the modern 8 screws to hold that pick guard down. Another thing you'll notice while we're here is that bridge pickup on the Classic Vibe on my model is mounted to the body. It is not mounted to the pick guard. That's why you don't see 2 screws on either side of that pickup. On a newer model, you will likely have the 2 screws on either side of the pick guard, because the bridge pickup will be mounted to the pick guard, just like it is on the American Pro 2. You can see those 2 screws here. Speaking of pickups, Classic Vibe has what they call Fender designed pickups, right? Pretty generic. In this model, the 2016, honestly, I'm not entirely sure what is in there. Some people say they're copies of Tone Rider pickups, whatever, made in the same manufacturer. I don't know. Doesn't really matter to me. But they're kind of just Fender designed Telecaster pickups. If you bought one brand new now, apparently has Alnico 5 magnets in them and are supposed to be a little bit fatter. Just something to keep in mind. So if you happen to know what pickups are in these older model Classic Vibes, make sure you leave that in the comment section down below. because there's lots of stuff on the internet and I'm not sure what's actually accurate. All right, in the American Pro 2, we have the Tim Shaw designed V-Mod 2 pickups. Basically, these have different kinds of magnets on the low strings and the high strings, kind of balance them out, that kind of thing. I will leave a link in the description down below if you want to check out all the specs and the things that Fender talks about around those, but they still are your standard, more or less, Tele style single coil pickups. All right, let's take a look at the bridge plate and the saddles. This is where there's also some differences. The Classic Vibe has your very classic standard bridge plate here, and it has that top rail goes all the way across the whole entire bridge plate. You'll notice on the American Pro 2, that top rail doesn't go very far at all. It kind of stops pretty quick, and so there's one design difference there. I'm guessing it's supposed to be more comfortable to not have it go all the way up the bridge plate, but to me, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. Another thing you'll notice that's different about these bridge plates, while both of these guitars do have the string through the body option, which is kind of standard Telecaster, the American Pro 2 does have holes in the back of the bridge plate, so you can do the top load thing, where basically instead of having your strings come through the body, they just go through the back of the bridge plate, and that's going to give it a little more of a slinky feel when you're playing because that break angle is going to be different. Some people prefer that. I prefer the through body. It's kind of the standard Telecaster thing, but there is an option there. The Classic Vibe does not have that option. Looking at the saddles, both of these have barrel brass saddles, the 3 saddles. Again, kind of that classic vintage thing going on there. One thing to note about the Classic Vibe is if you get a newer model, 2018 and after, it will have the chrome saddles. The older ones have the brass saddles like this one, just something to note there. The American Pro 2 also has brass saddles, but it has compensated brass saddles. You'll notice these little ridges here where one is a little further and one is a little back, and that's just going to help the intonation when we only have these 3 saddles here. It just kind of helps lock those in a little better, where the Classic Vibe does not have that compensation. But honestly, the Classic Vibe, I've been able to get intonated really well as is. So compensated is nice to have, but not a have to have in my opinion. You also notice that on the American Pro 2, the ends of the outsides of those saddles are rounded off. Again, I'm guessing for comfort, but never was really a thing for me on the Classic Vibe that I really noticed. Moving on to the controls, both of these have your 3-blade switch, very standard, and a volume knob and a tone knob. The Classic Vibe has the very standard traditional setup going on there, as where the American Pro 2 has a little bit different. That tone knob is a push knob, and when you are in the middle position, you can push that and it will put the neck and the bridge pickups in series, kind of making a sort of humbucker kind of thing going on there. Definitely has a little more oomph and a different sound than your traditional middle position. And also that volume knob on the American Pro 2 has a treble bleed on it. So when you roll back the volume, you don't lose the high end like you will on most guitars, including the Classic Vibe. It retains that high end, so your tone stays more similar throughout the whole volume range. So just kind of a couple cool additional options that are available there on the American Pro 2. As far as the output jack, both very traditional cup style Telecaster output jacks there. As far as weight, both of these actually are very similar. Guitars, even the same models, can vary in weight. Both of these happen to be just over 8 pounds. You may be able to find one that's lighter if that's important to you. All right, the last spec difference we're going to talk about regarding these 2 guitars is that when you buy them, the American Pro 2 comes with a really nice case. Apparently you can fly with it. I don't fly with my guitars, so it doesn't matter to me, but it is nice to have that really nice case for going to gigs and all that kind of stuff. It's well protected. The Classic Vibe does not come with a case or anything like that, so if you needed one, that would be an additional cost, although you would still be well below the cost of the American Pro 2, but it is nice to have that case that comes with the American Pro 2. All right, so that concludes the sound examples. They definitely sound a bit different. Let me know in the comments down below which one you preferred. Okay, so let's talk about why you might want to buy one of these over the other. And we'll start with the Classic Vibe. Obviously, one of the reasons you might want to buy this is because it costs about a quarter of the price of the American Pro 2. So if budget is a concern, as it usually is for most of us, this is a great option at a much lower price. So if you can't afford the American Pro 2, don't worry about it. Get one of these. Again, I played this for over 6 years. You can gig with this, you can record with this, whatever you need to do, this will do it. Another reason to get a Classic Vibe is basically the reason I did. I'd been a Les Paul humbucker player for a long time. I wanted to get a single coil option, and not really a Strat guy, just not. And so I wanted to check out the Telecaster. So I decided that I would get one of these as kind of just my entry point into the world of Telecasters, and fell in love with Telecasters. So if you're just looking to dip your toes in the Telecaster world, pick one of these up. That's a great option instead of having to dump a bunch of money into something more expensive. One thing I would mention is that, again, this one's the one that's made in China. Some people say that those are the good ones, and the one made in Indonesia aren't as good, and some people say the opposite. I think basically what it comes down to is that on more affordable guitars like this, the quality control is going to be a little bit more hit and miss because they're just trying to get them out the door as quickly as possible to make sure they keep their profits up and all that stuff. So I would make sure if you're getting one of these, if you can play the one you're getting, go play it, check it out, make sure it's all good and working as it should. Or if you can't do that and you need to buy it online, get from a reputable online dealer that has a good return policy and all that kind of stuff. I will say that this guitar is phenomenal. It's the fit and finish on this, I think, is flawless, and I've never noticed anything really at all on it all these years, and the tone knobs and everything, the electronics, all still work. The only thing I've ever had to do was just tighten this down, which is not uncommon. So if you make sure you get a good one, yeah, it's a steal of a deal for sure. So you can pick one of these up. All right, so now let's talk about why you might get the American Pro 2 over the Classic Vibe. If the Classic Vibe is such a great guitar, why would you spend the extra money and get this one? Well, one reason you might want to get this one over the Classic Vibe is just that the features it offers. It offers things the Classic Vibe just doesn't. So if you have the money to spend and you have some features on here that you really like and prefer, it might be worth it to you to spend the extra money. For me, some of those features are the shape of the neck. Again, I like a bit of a thicker neck, and this has that, so that's great for me. The satin on the back here is nice. Wasn't a have to have for me, but it's definitely a bonus and a nice feature to have. For me, the rosewood fretboard was a big deal as well. Obviously can't get that in the Classic Vibe, and being left-handed, it's just hard to find in general. Right-handed, you can find them more often, but having a rosewood fretboard option for me was a big deal as well. Another feature I really like on this is the treble bleed on the volume. Of course, you can probably add that to the Classic Vibe if you want to as well, but having it stock come out, you know, is nice to have as well. The push thing is cool. I use it some, not a lot, but it's definitely a cool added feature, but wasn't something that sold me on the guitar itself. And I also really like the pickups on this. I find them to be very versatile for a lot of different things, for everything from country to rock and everything. They're very versatile. I think like the more vintage style, like the Classic Vibe has, maybe has a little more character at times and has a very cool thing it does. But for me, these are a little more versatile. I play different genres, and these can handle those different genres really, really well. Another reason you might want to get this particular guitar is it's an actual Fender made in the USA. That's important to some people and not so important to other people. For me, it's not a real big deal, but again, I fell in love with Telecasters with that Classic Vibe, and I really kind of just wanted to get my one lifelong Telecaster that's always going to be around and always be mine. And so this had the features that I wanted, which was the most important thing, but also, you know, if I'm gonna get one that's just gonna be around forever, I kind of wanted it just to be a USA made Fender, a real Fender, that kind of thing. And so that's a lot of just emotional head, you know, stuff going on. But, you know, it's definitely a valid reason if you just want it. Now, I will say, just because this is made in the USA, doesn't always equate to better quality in some ways. The Classic Vibe I had came out of the box totally playable, all that kind of stuff. It sounded great, and I had it professionally set up just so it was set up to how I like it. It was just a preference thing. This guitar coming out of the box was not so good. It was basically unplayable in a lot of respects. The neck was shifted and the high E string kept falling off, so I had to adjust that. Truss rod adjustment, I did some setup work on this to get it kind of really close to where I wanted it. I think I still have a high fret or two here and there, and I'm probably going to have this dropped off at the guy that I use for setups and have him take care of all that kind of stuff at some point. But this definitely needed some work right out of the box to make it playable. So just because this is a USA Fender made one, whatever, doesn't mean it's going to be better, especially right out of the box. It should be, but doesn't necessarily mean it is. All right, so that's the rundown on these two guitars. Let me know in the comments down below which one you liked better. If you have one of these, let me know what your thoughts are on it, what your experiences are with it, all that kind of stuff. And if you're in the market for a Telecaster, are you looking at one of these, or are you looking at one of the other models that they offer? Let me know down in the comments down below. And also make sure you check out the description where I got those links to those free guides for guitar playing, tabs, home recording, songwriting, all that kind of stuff. Helpful free guides down there for you. Also, I have those affiliate links if you want to use those when you buy your gear, no cost to you. I just get a little kickback, and it helps support the channel so I can keep making these kind of videos. Other than that, thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.